Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, then please consider subscribing. Most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss a story and be the first to hear. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. Back when I was 14, summer was all about fun and no worries. You know the feeling, right? School was finally over, and all you could think about was chilling out and having a good time. That year, our school had come up with a killer idea, a camping trip. Just the sound of it got me all pumped up. I couldn't stop thinking about it, living in tents, hanging out with my friends, exploring nature, and just being out of the house. The idea was way too cool to be true. On the day we were supposed to leave, I was up at the crack of dawn. I was so excited I barely touched my breakfast. My mom kept nagging me to eat, but all I could think about was the adventure that lay ahead. My backpack was already packed to the brim with all sorts of stuff. My favorite snacks, a flashlight, my lucky baseball cap. I was ready for this. Once we got up at the school, we piled into this big old school bus. Now this bus had seen better days, but to us, it was our ride to freedom and we loved it. We were all buzzing with energy, talking, laughing, singing songs at the top of our lungs, and just being typical 14-year-olds. The journey felt like forever, but none of us cared. We were just happy to be on the road. When we finally reached the campsite, it was like a scene from a postcard. The place was packed with massive trees that seemed to touch the sky. The leaves were dancing in the wind, and the whole place smelled earthy, like rain on a hot day. Right in the middle of all this was a huge lake. It was so clear you could see the pebbles at the bottom. The whole place was just awesome, but I gotta admit it gave off a spooky vibe too. We spent the day setting up camp, and by the time we were done, it was almost evening. The sun was setting, and the whole sky looked like it was on fire. I remember standing there just taking in the view, thinking about how epic this trip was going to be. Little did I know that things were about to take a turn. As darkness fell, we gathered around the campfire. The fire was cracking and popping, sending sparks flying into the air. The teachers were telling scary stories, and all of us were huddled together, wide-eyed and a little scared, but still having the time of our lives. There was this one kid in our group, Toby. He was always a bit of a loner, never really mixing with the rest of us. That night, though, Toby was even quieter than usual. When we decided to play hide and seek, Toby was the first to hide. We all ran off to find our own hiding spots, giggling and trying not to make a sound. After a while, we realized that no one had found Toby yet. At first, we thought he was just super good at hiding, but as time ticked by, we started getting worried. And that's when our fun camping trip turned into a scary night that I'll never forget. When no one found Toby for a while, we figured he was just really good at the game. But as the minutes turned into hours, we realized something was off. The teachers joined the search, and a wave of worry took over all of us. We were shouting Toby's name, our voices echoing in the dark, but there was no response. It was like Toby had vanished into thin air. I can't even begin to tell you how much my heart was racing, how jumpy every little sound in the forest made me. The night was dark, really dark. I mean, I'd seen dark before. This was something else. The trees were like giants, standing tall around me. Every little noise made me jump, and my own voice calling out for Toby seemed to get swallowed by the thick forest air. The whole place gave me the creeps, but Toby was still missing and I had to find him. I walked further into the forest, pushing through bushes, jumping over fallen branches. My flashlight was my best friend right then, lighting up the way ahead. I kept thinking about Toby, hoping he was okay, and trying not to let my mind wander to scary thoughts. After what felt like forever, I came across this part of the forest that seemed older than the rest. The trees here were massive, with roots that spread out like giant fingers trying to grip the ground. There was something eerie about this place, but I knew I couldn't turn back now. Suddenly, my flashlight landed on something near a big, gnarly tree. I took a few steps closer, and there he was. Toby. He was lying at the base of the tree, not moving at all. My heart dropped. I felt this cold feeling creep up my spine. It was the scariest thing I'd ever seen. I screamed for help, my voice probably reaching every corner of the forest. When the teachers found us, they looked as freaked out as I felt. We had found Toby, but he was unconscious. The relief was quickly replaced by a new wave of fear. The rest of that night was full of panic and prayers. Toby was taken to the hospital, and we all waited, hoping he would be okay. It felt like a huge weight was lifted off our shoulders when we heard that Toby had just passed out from dehydration. He was going to be all right. Looking back, it was one hell of a night. We had all started the evening excited about the trip, never imagining it would turn into a nightmare. But it wasn't monsters or ghosts that we were scared of. It was the unknown, the fear for our friend. That camping trip was a harsh reminder to look out for each other and to respect the nature around us. Since then, I've been more careful, more aware of my surroundings on trips like these. Once upon a time, me and my best mate Ruji decided to go on a camping trip. Now here's the thing about Ruji. She's the sort of girl who loves adventures. Climbing trees, exploring forests, you name it, she's up for it. Me, not so much. I'm more of a stay-at-home and watch a movie kind of gal. But Ruji has a way of talking you into things. Before I knew it, we were planning a trip to Epping Forest. Epping Forest. Just the name sounds a bit spooky, don't you think? It's this massive forest in England, famous for all sorts of stuff. People say it's haunted, and I can't say I didn't believe them. But Ruji just shrugged it off. She was all excited making plans, packing stuff. Watching her, I kind of started to feel like maybe it wouldn't be so bad. The day we left for the trip was bright and sunny. We packed our stuff into Ruji's old car and hit the road. We sang songs and ate snacks on the way. Ruji was in the driver's seat, chatting away about all the fun we were going to have. As we got closer to the forest, the mood started to change. The trees looked taller and denser. There was this strange quiet in the air, like even the birds were holding their breaths. I couldn't help but feel a bit nervous, but Ruji just kept going on about how beautiful it all was. We found a nice little spot to set up camp. Ruji was in charge, of course. She set up the tent and made a fire while I just sat there taking it all in. The forest was really pretty, but in a creepy sort of way. The shadows were long, and the wind made strange noises as it blew through the trees. By the time we got everything set up, it was getting late. The forest was a whole different place at night. The noises were louder, the shadows were darker. We climbed into our tent and tried to get some sleep. Outside, the only sound was the wind in the trees and the distant hooting of an owl. But sleep didn't come easy for me that night. Little did I know it was about to get a lot worse. In the dead of the night, something woke me up. A rustling sound was coming from outside the tent. It was soft at first, like leaves brushing against each other. Then it got louder and louder, like someone or something was moving around out there. My heart was racing. I held my breath, straining to hear over the sound of my own heartbeat. Then it happened, the scream. It wasn't just any scream. It was the most chilling, terrifying sound I'd ever heard. It was high-pitched, like a woman screaming, but it had this weird echo to it, like it was coming from far away. The sound pierced through the quiet night like a knife. It sent chills down my spine, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I felt a cold shiver run down my back, like someone had dumped a bucket of ice water over me. The scream lingered in the air, echoing through the trees. It was as if the forest itself had gone silent, shocked by the eerie sound. I could almost feel it vibrating in my chest, making my heart beat faster and faster. I lay there frozen in fear as the scream faded into silence. The night was quiet again, but the silence was just as scary. I could still hear the scream ringing in my ears like a haunting melody that just wouldn't go away. I didn't sleep all that night. I just lay there, waiting for the sun to come up. When morning finally came, I felt a little less scared. I finally fell asleep, but my dreams were filled with that scary scream and the noise outside our tent. When I woke up, Ruji was already up. She seemed totally normal, like nothing had happened. I told her about the noises and the scream, but she just laughed. She didn't believe in ghosts or anything like that, so she thought it was probably just an animal. But I guess she saw how scared I was, because she agreed to pack up and leave the forest. So this all started when my friend said we should go camping. Now, I'm not really into that sort of thing. Give me a good movie and a comfy couch and I'm good. But my friends kept saying how fun it would be to get out of the city and into the great outdoors. So I was like, all right, why not? How bad could it be? The place we picked to go camping was this massive forest area, miles and miles away from the nearest town. It's the sort of place where you can forget about scrolling through Instagram or playing games on your phone because there's no signal at all. It's just you and the trees and the sky. Sounds pretty cool, right? Well, that's what I thought too. We set out on this sunny afternoon, all piled into my friend's old beat-up van. The drive was long and full of laughs, snacks, and off-key singing. As we got closer to the forest, I could see the trees in the distance, like a giant green wall. When we finally got there, it was late in the afternoon. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows on the ground. The air smelled like pine and something else, something wild. It was a far cry from the smells of car exhaust and fast food that filled the city. The noise, too, was different. Instead of the constant hum of cars and people, it was just the sound of the wind rustling the leaves, birds chirping, and the occasional snap of a twig. We found a nice spot by a lake where the trees weren't so dense and decided to set up camp. The sun was starting to set, the sky turning all shades of pink and orange. My friends got busy setting up the tents and gathering wood for a fire while I just stood there, taking it all in. I remember feeling this weird mix of excitement and nervousness. I was far away from home, far away from my comfort zone, and while it was kind of scary, it was also pretty cool. We got the fire going just as the last light of the day faded. The night came alive with the sounds of crickets chirping and the soft hooting of an owl somewhere in the distance. It was nothing like the city nights I was used to. There were no streetlights, no cars honking, just the flickering fire, the twinkling stars above. It felt so peaceful, so different. Crawling into my tent, I was surprised at how comfortable I felt. The air was cool, but not too cold, and I was wrapped up snug in my sleeping bag. I remember feeling oddly content, and I drifted off to sleep pretty quickly. Now, here's where things get real spooky. I had this nightmare, right? In my dream, I was alone in the forest, lost. The trees towered over me, their branches twisting and turning into scary shapes. I was running, trying to find my way back, but the forest just kept going on. And then I heard a noise behind me. I turned around and saw this shadowy figure chasing after me. I tried to run faster, but my legs felt heavy and I just couldn't move. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I was still in my tent, the faint morning light seeping through the fabric, but something felt off. I blinked, trying to clear the remnants of the nightmare from my head, and that's when I saw it. The tent zip, it was open. Now, I know for sure I'd zipped it up tight before I'd gone to bed. It was one of those things you always double check when you're camping in the middle of nowhere, you know. But there it was, wide open, the outside world visible through the gap. I froze, a wave of fear washing over me. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what could have caused it. Had it been the wind? No, it couldn't have been. The zip was too sturdy for that. An animal? Maybe, but I hadn't heard any rustling or any animal sounds. A person. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. I stayed there completely still for what felt like ages, my eyes fixed on the open zip. But there was nothing. No sounds, no movement. Just the morning light and the silence of the forest. I eventually managed to gather enough courage to get out of my sleeping bag and check outside. There were no signs of anyone or anything having been near my tent. It was as if the forest was holding its breath, watching me with 1,000 unseen eyes. Needless to say, I didn't sleep for the rest of the day. I kept replaying the events in my head, trying to find a logical explanation. But the only thing I knew for sure was that I'd zipped up my tent, and when I woke up, it was open. And that, my friend, is the scariest thing that's ever happened to me on a camping trip. It might not sound like much, but trust me, when you're in the middle of a forest, alone in your tent, and you wake up to find the zip open, it's scarier than any ghost story you've ever heard. Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.